Hi everyone, Kartik Krishna here from the Pavilion, simulcasting on Beyond the 90. From the Pavilion is a Beyond the Boundary podcast, and you can find the Beyond the Boundary newsletter at beyondthe90.net and sign up for the From the Pavilion newsletter there. We are brought to you every day during this tournament by the Boca Raton Tribune, and we're not going to do a specific Thursday or Friday World Cup daily. We are doing a kind of a episode to cover 2 days, which is to focus on the teams that have actually qualified for the Super 8. And the big question, can anyone beat India? India has won, I believe now 17 or 18 successive matches. I've actually lost track in ICC events, and has won 27 of the last 28 matches in ICC events. Alone lost that 2023 ODI World Cup final to Australia. And that was sort of a flukish match given everything. So today we're asking the $1 million question, which is, can anyone actually stop this Indian juggernaut? They are defending champions, they're playing at home, and they just finished Group A again, unbeaten. Just as they finished the last World Cup, just as they finished the Champions Cup, unbeaten. Right now on paper, it looks like they're playing in a different universe. They're playing a different game, and this is something we've seen in sport through the years. There were periods where it felt like Australia was playing a different game than everybody else in cricket. There was a period where it felt like Spain and Barcelona. It was kind of, they went hand in hand. Spain and Barcelona were playing a different sport in football than everybody else. There was a time, I can say this reliably as a Floridian, in the sport of American football, where the University of Miami and Florida State University appeared to be playing a different sport than everybody else. That's where we're at with India at this moment. But if you look closer at the group stage, you look at that U.S. match and you look at the Dutch match, which was on Wednesday, there are some frailties that maybe get exposed. So let's talk about that. Let's just talk about the blueprint that the two associate nations that gave India tough matches what that gives us. Because if you're the West Indies, if you're South Africa, if you're Zimbabwe, if you're one of the three teams that are going to face India in the Super 8 group, you are not going to look for much in India's just absolute demolition of Pakistan. You're looking at the U.S. match and you're looking at the Netherlands match. You're probably looking more at the U.S. match. The Netherlands match, we saw Sky experiment with some different bowlers, some different decisions in terms of fielding to try and test things. But you saw the Netherlands stay alive in the match, playing a lot of sweeps and scoop shots in the later overs. So that's something to note from that Netherlands match specifically. Now, let's talk about the U.S. match. We'll get back to the Netherlands match and Ahmedabad in a minute. Let's talk about the U.S. match in Mumbai. India was sitting at 77 with 6 wickets gone, lost already after 13 overs. Shadley Van Schalwyk, who has been one of the standout performers in this tournament, the U.S. bowler, had gotten 3 wickets in a single over, en route to his 13 overall wickets in this tournament. If it wasn't for Sky, India would have lost. And if it wasn't for the injury to Ali Khan, I once again stress that. That's the American side of me stressing that Ali Khan dove to try and prevent a boundary when he was in the field, picked up an injury on what looked like a not perfect surface, which is inexcusable for India and the ICC given the amount of resources India has, okay? They spent a lot of time criticizing the surfaces here in the States and in the West Indies last time. They weren't as bad as the English. The English media had a field day with the pitch conditions in the States. Oh my goodness. And they do that in football too, about anything American soccer related, soccer in the United States. They just do that in general. But that match was very telling because there were some critical moments. Ali Khan's injury I mentioned. There was the running error from Milind Kumar of the U.S. when he took off. Maybe it was a communication error with his partner Sanjay Krishnamurthy. That partnership was going great at the time. Where if he doesn't take off and get and the wicketkeeper bobbles it and then puts the ball in the stumps, he's out. Kumar doesn't get back in time. If that doesn't happen, if Milland doesn't make that running error, the U.S. has a very good chance, because they had an established partnership at that moment. They have a very good chance of catching India's low number of 161. So what about the Netherlands match in Ahmedabad? That was pretty telling. The Dutch kept them under pressure for most of the match. And as I mentioned, a lot of sweep shots, a lot of scoop shots. There were different field alignments. I understand India was experimenting. The match actually didn't mean anything. If they had lost, it wouldn't have meant anything in the larger scheme of things, other than they would have lost the match, which they seem to never do. But there were some loose deliveries from India's bowlers, and they tried some different bowlers. And you saw Indian batters have trouble with Dutt. We've seen a real problem from Abhishek Sharma, who went for a duck against the U.S. I think went for a duck in another match as well. Maybe it was against Pakistan. Maybe he had a duck against Pakistan or against Namibia, I think. Yeah, and so you've seen that. You saw the effective bowling of multiple bowlers from these associate nations. Dutt against India, Van Beek at times, except for that last over, Van Beek got really, really hammered. For the U.S., Mohammad Mohsin bowled very, very well against India. Didn't get much credit for that. We've already mentioned Skadley Van Schalwick. Ali Khan was bowling phenomenally well until he got hurt. He would have had 2 more overs to bowl. So that's the point about Ali Khan. I have to stress again. He had 2 more overs to bowl. The U.S. team was holding him for 2 of the death overs. He was probably going to bowl the 17th over and the 20th over, and he got hurt. And India, we know, went for 22 in the last over, in the 20th over, with Sky just ravaging Netravalkar, who did not have a great tournament, although he had an okay match against Namibia. That's good, because Netravalkar, for reasons of his profession, his non-cricket profession, is the most visible or known American cricketer. I call Ali Khan the classic American cricketer, but Netravalkar is actually the best known cricketer, maybe the only cricketer actually known in the mainstream in the United States, because of his day job at Oracle. And the kind of story, the context that was built around that during the 2024 edition of this tournament. So they've shown how you can beat India, those associate nations. Let's talk about just how it's been. Dubey and Sky have had to rescue them in these matches. Sky in the U.S. match, Dubey against the Netherlands. Dubey's had to rescue them with some catches against Pakistan. That's why that margin was what it was. Maybe not rescue them, but he's been very solid in the field. The death bowling has not been great. The Bumrah is back, but when Bumrah does not bowl, he's only going to bowl 4 overs. There is some inconsistency. I think Hardik has had problems at times. I think some of the other Indian bowlers have had problems. If you're facing a David Miller or a Markham from South Africa, that could be trouble with those bowlers. And they have. So the Netherlands game never really felt like it was in doubt. I mean, there were times during the Indian innings until those last few overs. Like I said, they hit Van Beek pretty hard in the last over. The U.S. game was in doubt the whole time, it felt like, until the last few overs of the U.S. innings, which were set up by the fact that Ali Khan had been injured and India had gone for 22 in the last over of their innings, and Netravalkar had bowled so poorly. And then the other replacement bowler, the other over that was Ali Khan couldn't bowl, was bowled by Shubham, who himself got injured bowling. and had to play on one leg and ended up batting on one leg after the running error by Milland. So India lucked out against the United States, and they struggled against the Netherlands. That's the bottom line. But like great teams, they always find ways to win even when they're not on. So that's the thing we have to be cautious about in this whole conversation. Who in this group can exploit India? Obviously, they face South Africa first on Sunday. Massive clash, rematch of the last final, and they beat India in a series last year. They have raw pace, obviously, in their bowling attack. Rabada has been hit at times in this tournament, but they've got him. They have Nortje. He's been hit at times too, but they have those two guys. They have Markham, they have Miller, they have all the batters we've talked about. And I would not sleep on the West Indies at all, because I think the West Indies are very, very strong in terms of their batting attack. Their bowling has been good in this tournament, and I think they have a vibe. They have a team spirit. They have a connectivity that we have not seen from recent Windies squads. So I like the Windies in this tournament also. Let's not sleep on Zimbabwe. I should mention them, that they've already pulled off two major upsets to get here, and they could catch India on a track at the Chepat in Chennai that grips, and spin bowlers have an advantage there. So Zimbabwe has a lot of pace bowlers, but let's see how they handle that track. Obviously, India is favored to beat all three of these sides, but I think they could have some trouble. So let's talk about the other group, which is a little more complicated in terms of who are the favorites there. Now, I tend to think, in spite of all the criticism I've had of England in this tournament, that going to their bowling has been loose. I have pointed out Rashid has gotten a lot of the criticism back home in England, but I pointed out that there's been loose bowling from Curran, there's been loose bowling from Archer, there's been even those few overs Jackson bowled have been pretty terrible, quite honestly. But there is as I talked about the other day with England, there is a certain reassurance you get in the middle of their order. People like Bethel have been impressive to me. Now, their opening partnership has been lousy, and I think this is ultimately the issue with England as we go forward, as we think about their performance in this tournament. Because the Salt Butler partnership has been the single worst partnership in this tournament in terms of opening batter partnerships. Worse than the opening partnerships for the UAE, Canada, Oman, all these sides that have struggled. But like I said, I like Bethel's coolness. Banton has played well. Brooke, he still has a lot in the tank for the rest of the tournament. So I think England advance out of this group, in spite of how critical I've been. So who gets the other spot? Pakistan, Sri Lanka, or New Zealand? Pakistan made easier work of it against the U.S. than India did. Now, it wasn't totally easy work, and the U.S., as my co-host From the Pavilion podcast, Ed Borth, correctly points out, the U.S. was hobbled by the injuries. The injuries to Shubham and the injuries to Ali Khan may have created maybe a 20-run swing in that match. So right there, you got the U.S. then probably within 5 or 10 runs with an opportunity to win. And of course, the U.S. has beaten Pakistan before, so we know they can beat Pakistan. So, but still, they weren't threatened the way India was by the United States. Now, and then we talk about their performance against Namibia was very reassuring. Performance against the Netherlands wasn't so good. I think they don't have enough in the bowling department. They've got some really good spinners that probably are going to have some success in Colombo, or have already have some success in Sri Lanka. But I don't. I think England still has the batters to beat them, to post a score on them and beat them. So that's why I'm favoring England in this group. Sri Lanka has home advantage, and I do think their spin bowlers are a little better than Pakistan's. And Pakistan's their spin attack was called in against the U.S. because the Pacers weren't working. The Americans had ripped them in the power play. So you're going to have to have some pace bowlers against England. You're probably going to have some pace bowlers against Sri Lanka. Now, what about New Zealand? New Zealand has, at first really impressed me in this tournament, but I was a little concerned, and obviously we know how good New Zealand's attack is, right, with Seaford and Allen leading off. But I was really concerned, maybe I shouldn't be, about the game against Canada, where Canada had a batter in Samra, Brampton-born batter, Brampton-born, which means he's a Canadian native, go for a century. That was very concerning to me. You had Rajwa, who's kind of the classic Canadian cricketer at this point. He had a pretty good match also. And they started the tournament so well, New Zealand, right? With their unbeaten partnership at the beginning of this tournament. But when they played South Africa, they didn't look the part at all, and they didn't look like they could compete with a better side. And I feel like New Zealand has a good enough team to compete, but maybe not a good enough team to get out of matches against the likes of Pakistan and England or Sri Lanka. So what about Sri Lanka in this group? They're at home. I think because they're at home, there is a certain vibe that's going to be there, and they're going to get a certain boost from being at home. Now, we thought that would happen with the West Indies in the Super 8 last time, and it didn't, outside of the match against the U.S., which even in portions of that match, they struggled. They have a good bowling attack, and it looks like the batters have really come on, right? Nissanka gets a century against Australia. So I'm hedging here because I do think you can make a case for Pakistan, you can make a case for New Zealand. I'm leaning Sri Lanka because they're at home. If they weren't at home, I'd probably say, I don't know who I'd pick between New Zealand and Pakistan. I mean, this is a balanced group, and I'm picking England to win the group in advance, but I've had my concerns about England in this tournament. So they are gettable. I'm just assuming, for example, Harry Brook is going to step up. I'm assuming the bowling is going to be better from Rashid. I'm assuming Jofra Archer is going to put the loose deliveries behind him on a track that grips a little more in Sri Lanka. England has played on high-scoring wickets to this point. So we have to remember that too when I criticize their bowling. But they're all, every team in this group is gettable. Just like in the other group, I'm picking India and South Africa to advance out of that group. But I have my concerns about India that I've articulated, but they just seem to always win, so you have to pick them. And South Africa, there are definitely some frailties that can be exposed, and the West Indies could do that. Zimbabwe, we think, are outsiders in that group, but they have beaten Sri Lanka. They have beaten Australia. So it's hard when you look at Zimbabwe to completely rule them out. So maybe the other group is stacked and this group isn't, which makes this accessible. I'm kind of hesitant about the Sri Lanka pick. I'm picking them because they're at home, but it would not surprise me if New Zealand or Pakistan pipped them to win. And I do think England will win the group. I think England probably win all 3 matches in this group, which, of course, they didn't do in the group stage. So again, Zimbabwe won their group. So you have 4 group winners on one side, and you have 4 group. Am I correct in saying this? 4 group runner-ups on the other? Yeah, I think so. That's why England is going to advance to the semifinals. And this is why the clunkiness of the ICC pre-assigning slots in the Super 8 probably has to end after.